Yeah, I guess I'll just do a little introduction. So everyone, thanks for joining. Mahima is actually the open science officer for the UPA journal, which you guys can hear more about in the first session tomorrow. And she's been doing some really cool work in making open science more accessible to undergraduates. And she'll be talking today about how you can implement open science practices as an undergraduate student. So I'll just hand it over to you.
Thank you. Yes, to give a bit of introduction about me, I am doing my master's right now in Sussex. And as Senior just mentioned, I am going to talk about certain things which might be useful to some people here. And if there are any questions and which is like not understandable, which is completely fine because there's might be some things which is not taught in uni at the moment. So you can always like tell me when I'm talking about it. Yeah. So yeah, the first thing is the date in this slide is wrong. So just make sure that is today. Otherwise, I will just move on to the content. Yeah. So when I first talk about why we need open science, we just need to talk about where did it all start from? And then the first thing that comes up is the credibility crisis that was and still is a big issue in the academia. So just to imagine what kind of scenario you might come across and you might feel that this is not right and what am I doing is not right. So you or me or us being early career researcher or being a student, suppose you have the objective kind of to replicate a study where you have already set up findings and it is for your thesis or dissertation or just independent study, and you have cleaned your data, done everything correctly according to the protocol that your supervisor has set or the lab has set or you yourself maybe, and you have done your all the computational stuff, like if you're analyzing your data with like any of the R, Python, or any of the um, softwares that you're using, and you have completely, like wholly followed all the procedures, still you have found a null effect. If you might feel a bit defeated. It is very normal to feel like, oh, this is not right, something is going wrong. What is it? So the before you blame yourself, the first thing that you should be able to tell yourself or understand it, that is your null result was mathematically predicted 2 decades ago. And by that, I mean that you have not failed, you have found or encountered something called credibility crisis that we need to understand first before we kind of come to conclusion about what is happening. So going back to history of 2005 does not like it's not that much of history to me, but might be some to be some people who are younger than me here. So there was a paper by John Ioannidis, if I'm not pronouncing the surname wrongly. His paper was called Why Most Published Research Findings Are False. As you can see, the paper I have linked it here, like not linked it, but I have posted like the picture. You can, it's very popular paper, and I think it's open science, of course. You can find it anywhere. So the issue that he kind of brought up was that using mathematical model, he argued that small sample sizes always lead to low statistical power. And what do we mean by that is when you have, because most of the studies in psychology, especially, we talk about p-values, their uh, power is very important. And to understand what is power, what is all of that, we need a separate class for that. But to just understand why is it going wrong, maybe one of the factors is you have incredibly low sample size for the amount of variables you are trying to predict or correlate or whatever. Then small effect sizes can give you, it's really hard to detect real effects. So it is all interconnected in some way. So small sample size and then small effects, and then you can't really say if the particular thing has any impact or not. And of course, if it's a flexible design, then too many researchers have too many degrees of freedom. And all of this, again, are very, very typical concepts that you might need to understand in a bit depth. But these are the things that are playing role in the background, and you might think it's just something that you have done wrong, which is not correctly thought. So then there was an empirical confirmation kind of a big study. It's called Reproducibility Project. And it was done in 2015, where they tried to replicate a lot of studies which has already been done, and tried to see that if the studies which were done in previously were done correctly or not. And they were not being able to replicate almost, as you can see, 61% in the diagram, and 39% were successfully replicated, which also leads us to think that the things that we do are not always in the correct manner. So what can we do to make these things correct, and what can we do to make science better in a way that we can reproduce it, we can replicate it. And also, as I was saying, the goal is not to make your science or the project or not to be null, but to make it proper so that it can be reproducible or replicable. So yeah. So there was again a paper the year following the reproducibility project was in Reality Check by Baker, where he kind of said that almost like he surveyed 1,500 scientists, and he found some kind of problems that were underlying these issues. That is, he saw that almost 70% of the scientists fail to replicate someone else's work. And surprisingly, more than 50% of people or the scientists fail to replicate their own work, which is kind of funny and sad. So, what are the problems that were there? As I said, one of the problems is again low power, as you can see, because again, small effect sizes and low power, we should always be able to check power before we start a project. So that is one of the things which was lacking. Second is file drawer problem, which also leads to unreliable literature. What is a file drawer problem? It's like I did a study or I did a project and I saw it's null and I'm like, nobody saw that, and I just put it somewhere in the drawer and nobody can ever know I did that study. What it does to science is incredibly expensive, and we put a lot of money and effort and every resources into it. And when we do it, we can't just put it in the drawer and just say, oh, it was never done because my science or my project was not successful because it was not somehow not null, it's significant by a p-value. It still is important because other people in the field should know that, oh, this is not working, maybe I can do something different. So going on the same question and I mean engaging into the same question and giving same amount of effort and resources time to time is not the right way to go. And the other thing, which is a recurrent problem in our academia, is publish or perish situation, where young researchers, including professors, if they have to keep the job, they have to like keep on publishing papers, and that leads to hasty decisions, wrong methods of publishing. There are so many things that people do to publish. So you just pay money and all of that, which is wrong, and which also leads to bad science. So now we come to the response to what we can do and what are the pillars to this. First is open access. We want, what is this open access? Is basically we want research freely available to everyone. So example is like share and adapt with credit. Of course, we want everyone to be credited. And this is an ongoing discussion in various fields of psychology, that how can give credit to people who are not, uh, 100% involved in writing the paper, but are somehow involved in the process. So even if you're collecting data from some people, they are also a part of the project, And if they are willing to, be there on the paper, you can actually keep them in the authors um, and co-authors. It is a very new, or I don't know if it's very new, but it is done in qualitative research very, um, yeah, very usually. So, why is open science important or open access important? One is no paywalls means more readers. So you have more readers. I think a lot of you might have come across when you search for papers is that you find a paper which the abstract seems very interesting and very much aligned to your question, but then you want to download it and you can't, and it's very frustrating. And that paper will be like, I don't know, 65 pounds or something like that. And it makes no sense to read us. And that also on subscription, that they will say that you can pay this amount for 7 weeks or 7 days or whatever. And that makes no sense. Like, why am I paying to read papers which the authors have paid to publish? So who is getting all this money and where is it going? So we just don't want that. So no paywalls means more readers. Tax-funded research should be public. So if government bodies or charity bodies are funding research, it should be public. Why is it behind a paywall? Because it's because our money, we have paid taxes, and that is going for the research. So it does not make sense to pay double, I guess. And faster scientific progress, as I said, because if you read more papers, if you have access to a lot of resources that you already have, of course, your progress will be much faster than what it is right now. Especially, I think this is very important to universities or students who are not from the um, privileged countries or who have very limited access to education. This is very important for them. Next is open data. I think this is where most people or most scientists fail to replicate or reproduce studies, that is with the data. So if we want raw de-identified data shared publicly, now here is something which is a bit of a question, that do we want raw data or do we want clean data? That is a different question and different discussion altogether. But mostly it is, we don't want cleaned or um, what you call is like perfect data, because there might be some things which we will be not aware when we run the analysis, which has been done behind the scenes. It can be like removing certain columns, removing certain data which were like considered to be outliers by the researchers, which is not right practice. So we will always want raw data, which is ideal. And it can be found in OSF, that is the Open Science Framework, Zenodo Figshare. These are places that you can always, when you read a paper, you will always see this kind of links attached to the paper, or if you find them in supplementary materials. I mean, you should be able to find them. If you don't, you know that paper is not good. And why, again, is it important? To verify findings independently. So you your result, when you kind of replicate a study, you should not be, or reproduce a study, you should not be influenced by what the authors have done, but independently you should be able to get the same or similar result. And combine you can combine data sets for meta-analysis. So when we do a meta-analysis, we need a lot more information sometimes than what is represented on the paper. And for that, often meta-analysts or meta-scientists have to contact the authors, which again is a very time-consuming process for more information. So if you already have your data sets out there in the open science or open data procedures, then the scientists can literally go to them and just find their own information without spending more time and resources in the project. And maximum value of participant effort. And by that, we mean that when we carry out a study, we collect much more data than what we present on a paper, because the paper will always answer a particular question and not necessarily all the variables that we collected in the first place. So often what happens is a lot of information and data is just there and nobody ever touched it. But to make maximum value of all our efforts and the participants' effort, and to regard that, it's always good to have the data open so that other researchers or maybe undergraduate students or anyone, like mostly students, would take up those projects and use the rest of the data to find something meaningful from that data. Then we have open materials that all tools used in this research. It can be survey questions, any kind of experiment that you might have set up, like a visual stimuli uh, thing, or software scripts when you do like R scripts or maybe Python scripts or protocol documents. And why this is again important? Because I've often seen like research papers have open stuff in like Figshare, and they will just have the questions in the document. They will just have the questions, and if I don't know what questions are they from, like are they from a survey, are they from a um, particular scale, I don't know. Every scale has like most of the scales have various versions and they are updated very regularly. So if the study was from 2010 and they have used a particular version from 2010, and I am in 2026, I'm trying to see, oh, okay, this item looks like this particular scale and I'm using the version of 2000 maybe 16, which is 6 years from 2010, then it will go wrong. So we have to kind of mention and be very clear about our materials when we are putting it out there, about what version is it, which year is it, what are the items, how many items did we consider? Because a lot of times researchers all kind of modify items from the particular survey or scale, which they are not very clear in the paper, which makes a lot of confusion and a lot of time, I would say, wastage when we are trying to figure what has been done in the paper. So these things are really important again. And the last one, which is like very important, is pre-registration, which I think most good journals are asking for when you're trying to publish a paper, that you have pre-registered or not. And why is it important? Because it's like kind of holding oneself accountable of what they're doing. Now, this might scare a lot of students, a lot of researchers, that, oh, I am locked. I am kind of prisoned with my own uh, pre-registration and I can't explore anything. That should not be the idea. This is not a prison for you. It is mostly like to have your ideas set up in a plan so that you have a plan and you can look back at any time of your project and be able to say that, oh, I was supposed to do this or I was going to do this, but right now my data is not likely showing this. So what else I'm doing, and I'm doing because of this. So kind of when you're writing your paper or when you're going by your thesis or whatever, you can always justify your new whatever you're doing right now, and the justification is important, not abiding to the previous registration that you have put out there. So you should be able to justify every step that you take while you're doing a research, and that is why pre-registration exists. And this helps you to kind of be kind of kind of remember what you told yourself that you will be doing, basically. So again, this kind of solves the problems like pre-harking, that is kind of having the predictions locked in there and trying to do the data analysis multiple times to get that prediction. And this is very, very common in by a lot of researchers, where they have the prediction set up because they have said that in the pre-registration that, oh, this is might likely to have um, significant effect. So there, if you pre-register this, that we are thinking that this might have, then the problem of pre-harking goes down. Hopefully people have not found new ways to do it, but yeah, that is one thing. Then pre-hacking is kind of being the solution is to commit to your analysis, as I said, and file drawer problem, as I explained. So yeah. And yes, another solution that we have, other than pre-registration, is the registered reports. This is a bit more of commitment, and this is a bit more of, I would say, I really like the process of registered reports. It takes a lot of time and commitment, but it's completely very nice to have if you can have. That is this. Here you basically kind of go through all the publication process before even you collect your data, which is the easiest way to describe what registered reports are. So basically you will have your question, your introduction in short, your methods and everything, and you will submit a very refined report to the journal, and the journal will give you feedbacks about what they think about the report, and it will go back and forth. Of course, okay, it might not go if you're incredible, but if you're not, if you're a researcher, you will have that uh, back and forth. And after all those steps, you will finally, the journal will be like, yeah, you can go ahead, and then you collect the data and just write your results. And most of the times journals are will just accept it, because all the work of understanding what is going to happen, what the journal or the reviewers think might need change or whatever, has already been done. So this is an incredible way of doing research, because it saves a lot of time later on, kind of eases any anxiety that you might have with research, that, oh my God, my data is not giving me what I thought it would give. And you can still be able to write your paper and publish it, and it can be a null result paper as well. So it does not matter what kind of result you get, but the process is more important here, how you do it and the methods. So you can see the flow here, and yeah, it's really incredible if people can go through it. So there's often this discussion that, is open science for everyone? Because psychology is such a vast field, we don't just only have studies which are quantitative in nature, which only has like data, and which is not only just like computational data, I would say, which you can run through any of the softwares. But we also have qualitative, multicultural, philosophical, and there are so many ways to collect and use different structures in psychology to kind of do research. Now, this particular uneasiness was solved by a very recent report by Nature, and there they talked about a lot of different fields of psychology. As you can see here, open science is for everyone, and the perspectives are qualitative. It was right like last year, somebody said that the contribution can be on reflexivity and not rigidity. So what reflexivity means in qualitative is very important. It's like where the particular person stands when they're trying to collect or write a paper. So me being a researcher, where do I stand means what color of a person am I, what privilege I hold, where I am from, and how is it impacting my research and my collection of data. And all of this being transparent about yourself and the being reflexive about the process is actually open science. You actually say that, oh, this is my stance and I'm doing this research. So a person who is reading the paper, they might already know, okay, this person have these values and biases and they are clear about it. So it has not kind of influenced the results of the research. Next is multicultural. So basically using inclusive tools, not just because most of, if you think most of the tools or most of the skills or things are very centered in the West, and it is centered around a particular race. So using those tools and not adapting it to specific cultures or specific regions can go wrong certain times, because it will not give you the actual essence of the data of that particular region or people. And basically going to the philosophical end of perspective is basically rethinking the validity. There's a lot of discourse with meta science right now, what validity means, what reliability means, and what we consider as valid. All of this discourse and discussion will lead you to what open science is. It's not just having very, very strict um, code or running analysis only based on quantitative data. And this brings me to a bit more details of what reproducible code is. This might be a bit more for some undergrad students because this is not exactly all universities kind of teach their students. Might be familiar, you might be familiar, but yeah. Now, what is again a good code? Basically a code that a computer can execute and human can understand. So you should be able to understand your code. And by that it means that what our what is our audience. One is the machine, that the machine is executing or reading the command or the code, and the second is your future self. You writing a good code is basically your future self will thank you to write this code, and it will be like, yeah, I did a good job, because you might will it will definitely not remember what you have done after 3 or 6 months. And if you write something like you're dealing with the data from, for example, depression, and you name it as anxiety, and you will always think it's anxiety. So, or like DEP, what is DEP? So, if you should be able to kind of tell yourself or make a code book, help yourself in the future that this means this, basically. So some base kind of not tricks exactly, but some things to remember is when you make your code reproducible, or if somebody else is running your code, basically, they don't have your system, they don't have your laptop or computer. So you when you're reading, the first step is to read your data. And if you kind of use absolute paths, it will definitely not work. What do you mean by absolute paths? Is basically if you put like your C driver and your username and your name, the other person laptop or computer or system will not have that. They might have their whole system in a different username and in their name. So always have remember, when you're trying to write a code, which doesn't matter if it will be used or reproduced or replicated by anybody else, is always better to write in a relative path where you just mention the data and where it is and the data name, basically. And always try to use CSV, because it's kind of, it helps with any kind of softwares out there. If you use SPSS or other data, I'm not sure about this data code, but the SPSS is, I think, SAS, and I think only R can read it, but again, it kind of deletes a lot of stuff. So try to have CSV and not XSLX, which is Excel. Basically, it also kind of makes things worse. So having a particular, making things easier for you and others, basically, it's very normal. And then having what language you're using, what tool you're going to use to kind of yourself getting familiarized. If you're also planning to learn a new language, you should be able to know what you need and what you are studying. So, for example, if you're a social science researcher, I mean by that is just social psychology, you might not need MATLAB unless you are doing like a interdisciplinary project, or you need like you're doing something really cool. What I mean by that. But if mostly if you're doing like, I mean, any psychology project you can do by R, Python, SPSS, yes, data. So according to your need and your preference, you can learn a language. And I think it's better to know at least one or two languages and just keep yourself at it and get better in it, rather than knowing 5 languages and you don't know anything about any of them. It doesn't really help anybody. So just knowing nuances of it will help you. So just to read out what's there in the slide, is like when you have R, you use usually mark R markdown or quarter. Quarter is really useful and very easy to look at. If you use Python, you have other tools, but Jupyter notebooks are the most common ones. And I have never myself used MATLAB, but I've heard my friends use it. So there is that. And yes, so what I was saying basically when I was talking about what using comments and telling yourself what is useful. So if you're using, for example, you just mentioned like load data and calculate mean, we can see that you're trying to do mean here. So that is a good comment. But again, it does not say what exactly you are trying to achieve. But sometimes when you have like detailed comments, it can help you to save a lot of time thinking, oh, what I did back then and why did I do it here? The why is very important because you will often come back to your code and be like, oh, why did I muted this data? Why did I cut off this data and was using a different column? What happened here? So you can always use like hash and kind of comment and say that what was in it. Or if it's getting too clunky, you can always have a different code book where you can explain all your steps for yourself and anybody who is doing it again in future. And there is like a principle which is like basically don't repeat yourself. So when you're writing code, as maybe for beginners or initial researchers, this might not come very intuitive. But as you go on reading more papers or doing more, writing more code, it becomes more intuitive that you don't need to write the same thing again and again. You can just maybe create a function, and creating function is very common in any of the languages that you go through. It's R, Python, or any languages that you see. You can just create a function and that just call the function again and again. It makes codes very usable and reproducible, replicable, and all of it, and makes the codes less clunky and looks good. That's it. So finally, we have the key platforms here. So these are basically the links. I can share this and you can always go back to it. And if you can also just search about them. OSF is a great platform used by many, many people. GitHub is right now mostly used by STEM, but people in social science have started using GitHub as well. And I feel GitHub is a really incredible way to share not just code, but also papers and stuff. It's also becoming open sciencey platform. Zenodo is for data archiving. Octopus and Prospero are for pre-registrations. Prospero is mostly for pre-registrations of meta-analysis and systematic reviews. So there is that. And it's just a quick kind of things that what we talked about is basically that before data collection, we can always pre-register our hypotheses and analysis plan. That is the method section. We have to conduct a power analysis if we are only following the frequentist approach of p-values. And then as like pre prepare data sharing plan, having everything sorted out basically before you start something. During analyses, using reproducible better code if you're using the quantitative approach, commenting on codes and telling why you have done something, and having version control if that's a way to do it. Because when you do like Python and you have GitHub way of kind of sharing your data, it's always good to have version control because it helps you and maybe your supervisor if you're doing a thesis or dissertation to tell that, oh, at this point I thought of this and then I did this, but then you forget what you have done before was actually correct maybe. So you can always go to the version control and see what you have done before, and this helps you. And yeah, and after publication or during publication, does not matter, at any point of time, do share your data and code. So yeah. So one final thought is basically if you're currently looking at your results and you have feel that you have not done good, you can always think that if you have adopted open science policies, you can always think that it is correct in a way that it is robust, it is inclusive, and is reliable for people. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.